This might be the most frustrated man of 2023. Married for 16 years, yet none of his 3 children were biologically his. But that wasn't the worst part. When the truth came out, his wife gave birth to a 4th child, and that one wasn't his either. Recently, Mr. Chen from Shangrao City, Jiangxi Province, revealed that after more than a decade of marriage, none of the 3 daughters he raised with his wife were actually his. When this shocking revelation surfaced on social media, it quickly went viral, drawing widespread attention and causing a massive social uproar. Mr. Chen and his wife, Ms. Yu, were introduced through a matchmaker in 2007. At that time, blind dating was a common way to find a life partner. They got along well and after a few months, made their relationship official. In November 2007, Ms. Yu became pregnant, and the couple registered their marriage with their parents as witnesses, formally becoming husband and wife. On February 28, 2008, they held a grand wedding ceremony. Before marriage, Mr. Chen worked in Hangzhou as a concrete mixer truck operator. After tying the knot, he quit his job and became a semi-trailer truck driver to provide a better life for his wife and future children. Driving a semi-trailer was exhausting work, so Mr. Chen lived and ate in his truck to cut down expenses, handing over his entire monthly income to Ms. Yu. Over the years, Ms. Yu gave birth to 3 daughters and stayed home to care for them, while all financial responsibilities fell on Mr. Chen's shoulders. To him, this was nothing unusual. He believed that as long as he could give his wife and children a comfortable life, his hard work was worth it. Though they weren't wealthy, their life was peaceful. Everything changed in May 2021 when his wife, who had been out of the workforce for years, suddenly suggested going into business with a man named Wu Tan. Mr. Chen, unfamiliar with Wu Tan, agreed to her proposal without much thought. One evening, around 7 p.m., Mr. Chen video called his wife. She answered briefly and then quickly ended the call, saying she was about to put the children to bed. Since it was still early, he found it strange but assumed she was just tired. However, the same thing kept happening repeatedly, making him uneasy. Since he was frequently away for work, his doubts grew stronger. Using his phone's location tracker, he checked her whereabouts and was shocked to find she was at a hotel. He drove there but couldn't bring himself to go inside. He hesitated, unsure of what he would uncover and how he would face his children. Instead, he waited outside all night, still clinging to a sliver of hope that there was an innocent explanation. But reality hit him hard. The next morning at around 9 a.m., he saw Ms. Yu walk out of the hotel with a man. They checked out together. Unable to contain his fury, Mr. Chen slapped both of them. His emotions were justified. What husband could tolerate such betrayal? It was an utter disgrace. Perhaps feeling guilty, neither of them fought back. Mr. Chen then informed his wife's relatives, including her aunt and uncle, and they all went to her mother's house to confront her family. He expected them to be outraged, but to his shock, they told him to let it go and move on. Mr. Chen was furious. Why should he just accept the humiliation and pretend nothing had happened? But what could he do? In a media interview, Mr. Chen tearfully expressed his heartbreak. In the end, for the sake of his daughters, he chose to endure the pain and move forward. He thought life would continue as usual, but things took another unexpected turn. In late December 2021, Mr. Chen discovered that his wife had secretly taken out a loan of over 300,000 yuan. It was a significant amount, and when he confronted her, she casually claimed it was for their business project. By then, Mr. Chen had pieced everything together. Her business partner was none other than Wu Tan, the man from the hotel. Enraged, he slapped her again. That was the final straw. His wife abandoned their home, leaving their 3 daughters behind, and cut off all contact with him. Mr. Chen began to suspect that the children might not be biologically his. At first, he doubted his 3rd daughter the most. Firstly, because she didn't resemble anyone in the family. Secondly, when his wife was pregnant with their 3rd child, they had used protection. When she conceived, he was confused, but his wife reassured him that no contraceptive method is 100% effective. At that time, he believed her and didn't dwell on it. But looking back now, he couldn't help but wonder if the child was truly his. As these thoughts troubled him, his eldest daughter told him that her mother had considered divorcing him and planned to take the eldest and third daughters with her. This made Mr. Chen suspicious. Was the eldest daughter also not his biological child? He also noticed that only the eldest and third daughters had new clothes, while the second daughter didn't even have a proper winter coat. This led him to believe that the second daughter might be his only biological child. To be fair, he decided to conduct a DNA test for all 3 children. Then came the devastating truth. When the results arrived, Mr. Chen felt as if his world had collapsed. None of the 3 children were his. It was an unbearable humiliation. For over a decade, he had been unknowingly raising another man's children, while his wife betrayed him repeatedly. During an interview, Mr. Chen said that if even one child had been his, he would have been willing to stay in the marriage. But even that small hope was shattered. When he received the paternity test results, he lost all control. Desperate for justice, he reached out to every media outlet he could think of, hoping to find a way to resolve the situation. On May 22nd, Jiangxi Media agreed to interview him, and the story quickly spread. Then, on the night of May 28th, something shocking happened. His wife, along with her lover Wu Tan, arrived at Mr. Chen's home. They lit firecrackers using mosquito coils, smashed the windows, and violently banged on the door. Mr. Chen's nearly 70-year-old father almost suffered a heart attack, while his mother was so terrified she couldn't sleep the entire night. After this incident, Mr. Chen was enraged. He kept the broken windows as evidence and decided to take legal action. How could his wife, after committing such a disgraceful act, still be so bold and bring her lover to harass him at his own house? When reporters approached his wife's mother, she didn't solely blame her daughter. Instead, she accused Mr. Chen of frequently abusing his wife, claiming he was biased against daughters. She even alleged that he had kicked and beaten his wife after their first daughter was born, and if the villagers hadn't intervened, she might not have survived. Mr. Chen firmly denied these accusations. He told reporters that before his wife's affair, he had never even raised his voice at her, let alone been violent. So, was his mother-in-law fabricating these claims? Or was his wife using these false accusations to cover up her own guilt? When the reporter interviewed Ms. Yu, she avoided answering whether Mr. Chen had abused her due to his preference for sons. However, when asked about the paternity of the 3 children, she arrogantly dismissed the question, saying it didn't matter. Just think, how shameless must a person be to say such a thing? Even in adoption, both parties voluntarily agreed to raise a child. How could she deceive her husband into raising children that weren't his, and then act as if it was no big deal? Not only that, but before Mr. Chen even took the paternity test, Ms. Yu had already told him about the children's real parentage. After everything unfolded, she took all 3 children with her, and Mr. Chen didn't stop her. For years, he had given everything he could to these daughters, only to be betrayed. Now, to him, these children were a painful reminder of his wife's deception. They stood as proof of his humiliation, and he couldn't even bear to look at them. Yet, despite being the victim, some people criticized Mr. Chen, calling him heartless. They argued that the children had called him dad for over a decade, and even if there was no blood relation, there should still be an emotional bond. After all, the children were innocent. To this, Mr. Chen responded, "It's easy for outsiders to judge. People sitting on their moral high ground never stop to consider, if they were in my position, how would they react?" This is a classic case of standing and talking without feeling the pain. The betrayal had completely shattered Mr. Chen's dignity as a man. He was so ashamed to face his family that he even considered ending his own life. Fortunately, after encouragement from friends and relatives, he realized that punishing himself wasn't the answer. Instead, he decided to seek justice through legal means and ensure that those responsible face consequences. While pursuing his lawsuit, an anonymous individual approached him, offering 150,000 yuan as a settlement in exchange for keeping the matter quiet. But Mr. Chen refused outright. He wasn't looking for money. He wanted justice and dignity. To make matters even more shocking, after this incident became public, Ms. Yu gave birth to a fourth child at Shangrao People's Hospital. And if you're wondering, yes, the baby was also not Mr. Chen's. On December 28, 2023, Mr. Chen's divorce lawsuit against Ms. Yu was heard at the Jiangxi Provincial People's Court. He demanded that she repay the child support he had provided for the 3 children and compensate him for emotional distress, totaling 500,000 yuan. However, neither Ms. Yu nor her lover appeared in court, so the case was not ruled on during the hearing. While the final verdict remains unknown, Ms. Yu's shamelessness and moral decay have caused her to lose the trust of everyone. Public opinion overwhelmingly supports Mr. Chen. No matter how the situation unfolds, the one who has suffered the most is undoubtedly Mr. Chen. This experience will haunt him for the rest of his life. When 2 people marry, if the relationship ends, they should part ways with dignity. But repeatedly committing infidelity within a marriage is nothing short of public humiliation. Ms. Yu's actions are utterly disgraceful. We hope she faces the consequences she deserves and that justice is served for Mr. Chen. What do you think about this incident? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments and let's discuss this together.